Hi, my name is Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss one of the most persistent whingers of the Leave side in the Brexit debate, that is, and then break it down into its constituent parts of nonsense. But first, if you'd like to be notified of upcoming content, then please click the subscribe button and click on the bell notification icon as well. So I keep seeing, I saw again yesterday, a fairly persistent complaint from Leavers, and that is that Remainers, and indeed Remain MPs, have destroyed democracy. Of course, we on the Remain side say that Leavers destroyed democracy, though we're not saying the entire Leave side did, just a few key individuals that, like, for example, unlawfully shut down Parliament. But let's look at the Leave side argument here. So their argument seems to be based on the notion that Remain MPs keep voting against Brexit. Further, both Theresa May and Boris Johnson accused opposition MPs of wrecking their Brexit process. Now, in this video, I'm not going to get into the fact that the referendum was illegally run and therefore completely invalid. I don't even need to mention the fact that British judges said that it would have been rerun with the original result vetoed if it were a binding referendum due to the unlawful acts committed during the campaign. Oh, actually, I just have mentioned that. But I'm not going to draw on that here. MPs had several votes on the Brexit process. First of all, they had to vote to allow the Prime Minister to trigger the Article 50 process. So, if we look at Parliament, there are 639 seats which may take part in parliamentary votes. This is because there are 650 MPs, but you have one Speaker and 3 Deputy Speakers who may not vote, and at the moment, 7 Sinn Féin MPs who do not take up their seats in Westminster. So, let's pretend that the 51.9% and the 48.1% were actually a static position on the part of the British people, which was maintained since at least the 2017 general election, where, I remind everyone, the people chose their representatives in order to deal with the Brexit process. I would also remind people that the party that was threatening a no-deal Brexit, the only party that was threatening that, lost their majority. Now that means they became a minority. Now we all know that a party getting a majority in a general election doesn't mean the people agreed with everything they said. But we do know that if you lose your majority, people are saying that they don't agree with your overall manifesto. They are certainly not convinced you know what you're doing. So the official position after the more recent general election is that people didn't like the threat of a no-deal Brexit. But back to those MPs. So if the split in the country were maintained, then that would mean there'd be 332 MPs that should be backing Brexit and 307 MPs that should be representing the Remain portion. That is the way representative democracy should work, surely. So that vote for triggering Article 50 should have been won 332 to 307. However, it was won 498 to 114. So Remain MPs, who should have been representing those of us on the Remain side, were voting for Brexit on that occasion. They didn't have to, and if they were being representative, shouldn't have done. If anything, we should be annoyed that our MPs, the ones who are supposed to be representing us, are not doing so. They actually have voted against the interests of the 48% of us that voted on that fateful day to remain. So in that sense, you could argue that some Remainers did damage democracy, but by not upholding that split in the country that the referendum alleged. But I'm not sure that's what they're attacking the MPs for. In fact, I'm quite sure it's not. So the next stage was passing the European Union withdrawal bill in its entirety. Again, this should have sneaked through 332 to 307 if MPs were representing the split that Leavers claim was being maintained. But again, Remain MPs voted in favour of the bill by a significant margin and it passed into law. The law, however, prevented a no-deal Brexit unless Parliament specifically voted for it, and given that the only party that threatened a no-deal Brexit lost their majority, it was reasonable to do so. I'd even suggest that the fact that no Leave campaigner ever said that we should leave without a deal, and that the party threatening no deal lost their majority in a general election a year later, should have meant that democracy demanded that no deal should have been taken off the table forthwith. Now, the next major vote for MPs was then to approve the withdrawal agreement arranged by Theresa May's government. Again, if MPs were representing the split, then it would have passed through last December 332 to 307. But it wasn't. In fact, it was going to do so badly that the vote was put off until January of this year. When it went ahead, it lost 432 to 202. Those pesky Remain MPs not playing ball. Oh, but wait a minute. Boris Johnson voted against it. Mark Francois voted against it. Jacob Rees-Mogg, Sir William Cash. Oh, wow. Actually, there were loads of vocal Brexiteer MPs who campaigned in the general election on a platform of delivering Brexit that all voted against Brexit on this occasion. But hang on, this is strange. We're being told that Remain MPs are voting against Brexit, which they aren't in a greater proportion to the 48% of Remain representation that is due. The withdrawal agreement was voted down by Brexiteers. And the proof is actually very simple. As soon as those Brexiteer MPs who voted against Brexit under Theresa May several times voted in favour of it under Boris Johnson, well, it passed through then. So where were those Remain MPs blocking it then? They weren't. They were never blocking it. It was the pro-Brexit lob that were blocking it. So let's make the point clear again. Despite the fact that there is now clear evidence that the referendum campaign broke serious laws, and that's not evidence in the sense of papers have produced it. It's been determined that they broke the law. That is a fact. They used personal data to target UK voters with fake news, and where both polls and elections in May were showing a clear surge for Remain parties, MPs were passing the next stage of the Brexit process towards the end of 2019 after all this was known. And if those same Brexiteer MPs that voted against the process back in January had backed it then, we'd have already left the EU by the end of March as originally planned. All those elections in May wouldn't have happened. Everything since wouldn't have happened. In fact, we'd probably just be, even now with the situation we have now, a couple of weeks away from leaving, but Boris Johnson, one of the Brexit leaders, pulled his withdrawal agreement, the final act needed to actually leave the EU, even though MPs were voting in favour of it. So one of the Brexiteers in chief unilaterally stopped the process for delivering the withdrawal agreement that he said was a great deal for Britain, that Parliament were voting for. There was no Remainer plot, even though our Remain MPs are supposed to keep opposing this in order to represent those of us who don't want to leave the EU. So there should always be 307 MPs voting against any measure designed to take us out of the EU. Always. Now, with that representation in mind, if a vote against Brexit ever wins, count up the number of MPs it wins by, above 307. Then count out how many so-called pro-Brexit MPs voted against the measure. In every single vote, it has always been more than that margin. The fact is that it is Brexiteers who have blocked Brexit. That is an objective fact. But the reasons are more speculative. So I would say it's most likely that delivering the Brexit promised in 2016, you know, the one about full access to the EU and its single market, but making up our own rules and not having to deal with the European courts, is quite impossible, legally as well as politically. So when it comes down to it, there are basically two main types of Brexit. One, you deliver on the promise to have full access to the single market, but that means following EU rules and standards without having a say in them because we gave up our seat at the table. Now that doesn't sound terribly like taking back control, even to the sort of people who support Brexit. So scratch that. Or two, you deliver on the promise to make up our own rules and not have to deal with the European courts. Okay, we can do that. But that means not being able to have access to the single market. It also means no arrangements for travel, security, healthcare, etc. Because it would take years to arrange these in a series of bilateral agreements. That means the chaos predicted by Yellowhammer would become reality. Well, that would finish them off as well. So they were caught between two impossible situations. Of course, the Brexiteers kept voting against Brexit. Of course they would, because they don't want to get found out. It's also possible to see why some pro-Remain MPs, who do actually make up the majority of the House of Commons, would support Brexit. Let it happen and let everyone see just how damaging it is to the country with their own eyes. Some think that way. Let the argument be killed off once and for all by making it happen. In maths, we'd call that a proof by contradiction, I suppose. Because that's another point to consider. The majority of MPs absolutely don't want a no-deal Brexit, no doubt about that at all. It's reasonable to say that most don't really want Brexit at all. If you look at how they campaigned in the referendum in 2016. Many are keeping quiet about supporting Remain now for political purposes. But the point is that a central column of the Leave complaints is that a majority of MPs are against Brexit. So if both sides agree that, I agree that a majority would be against Brexit if they had a choice, and if the Leave side agree that, then let's go with it. Let's take that as a fact. So I'll finish off by pointing out two more things. One, all the necessary stages to leave the EU, when put to a vote, have been passed by MPs. So that means by definition, Remain MPs have voted in favour of Brexit. They voted against their own position based purely on an illegal referendum that never should have been allowed to stand. How on earth can Leavers complain about Remain MPs when they're actually voting for Brexit? And the second thing is, these MPs were elected to Parliament in 2017. That is more recently than 2016, and as it's more recent, it's a more accurate reflection of the true will of the people. And if these MPs are a majority of them of a Remain position, something they didn't hide, then people voted for them on that understanding. So if a majority of the House really are pro-Remain, as Leavers claim, then that means the will of the people is to remain, because that's what they voted for in 2017. So the claims from Leavers are just so much hot air, really. It's strange, don't you think, that a group of people who keep insisting that they won are constantly complaining about the situation. I have to say, I've won things in my life, and when I have, I don't recall ever having complained about anything. So if they're not acting like they've won, have they really won? Anyway, I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.